We're looking at the creation stories. I've got to get something to mark the blackboard with. So we were talking about the comparison of Genesis with the modern scientific view of these things. And I was telling you, because of all the fuss we get in the newspapers and everywhere, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the fuss is. To me, again, it's a confusion of literature and science. This is a literary effort. It's not supposed to be a scientific effort. It's trying to teach people something. It's actually, for that time, probably pretty advanced. And certainly it's not in great conflict with any modern theories, because what you have here is pretty evolutionary. And the only difference is the moral component. And I think, now there's other differences, but I mean the main difference is the moral component, so it's more personal. And I think that actually it probably would be a good thing if we got a moral component in the universe someplace, even if it isn't really there. Because, you know, the world seems to me to be getting worse. Of course, people who are older always think it's getting worse, so that may just be my relative perception. You may think it's great now because you're younger than me, and then when you're older, you'll think it's getting worse too. So this is a pretty normal view of things because it's getting less familiar to you, and you don't like what you see. So you think it's getting worse. It may just be that's just the way things are. I know one thing is worse. It's much more crowded, much more traffic, and the home prices have skyrocketed 10 times what they were. So I'm sure that that's worse, because even though I may benefit by the price of a house or something, my offspring certainly have a tougher time than I do. So I think that's clearly worse. Some other things like gasoline and other things like that are pretty pathetic. So things, to my mind, are obviously worse. But there may be some better things, less racism, not many people being lynched at the moment, and things of that kind. So there may be some better things. So the moral component would probably be a help. But I think also, people say, well, what is morality to you or to anyone else? And to my mind, it's an aesthetic thing. It's an aesthetic. I think I mentioned it last time. I'll just emphasize it again, because that goes with what this book is. This book is an aesthetic object. Aesthetic means having to do with art or beauty, in this case literature. It's an aesthetic thing. I mean, there are many, as I told you, I think earlier, there are many different ways to live. But since we only get one chance, it looks like, I'm not a Hindu in the sense I believe that we're going to come back 100 million times. Since we only get one chance, even if we do come back, I'm not going to be aware of myself, that's for sure. I don't know anyone else, whoever was. But we only get one chance. I'd like to do it the best way I can. And that's an aesthetic decision. I mean, I could choose to do it the worst way possible. I could kick the heck out of other people, I could kill other people, I could steal, I could do all kinds of things, but it doesn't please me. It doesn't recommend itself to me. I choose not to do those things. It's a choice. But it's not necessarily a moral, it's an aesthetic choice. To my mind, it's a matter of being higher or lower. Living in a higher manner, and why not live the highest way you can? Why treat your life as a piece of junk, as something low? Why live in a low manner if you don't really have to? If you have freedom, forced to, okay, but if you have freedom of choice, why not live the highest way you possibly can? That's an aesthetic decision to me. It's because I choose to live like that. I don't know if you ever saw that movie Lawrence of Arabia, or if I mentioned it to you previously. I mentioned it in one class. Lawrence is the one who sort of lived like a Bedouin among the Arabs and sort of helped the Arabs gain independence from the Turks. At one point he's speaking to an Bedouin chieftain, something like Abraham, and he's trying to convince him to come on this raid on Aqaba, the seaport. I don't know if you've seen the movie. I don't even know how accurate the movie is. I doubt it's very accurate. It's again an aesthetic presentation. And he tries to give him English money and so on and so forth. And the chieftain finally said to him, I'm going to go because it pleases me. Not because of anything that you're offering me, not because of the money, not because of anything. Auda is his name. Auda is pleased to go. It pleases me. It's an aesthetic choice. It pleases one, and it pleases one to live a certain way. So I think that's what the Hebrews were building into this first chapter of Genesis. Something that was pleasing. It was good. And on the last day, it was very good. A good sermon. I didn't even know I was going to give it. There you are, a sermon. So yeah, I am a big supporter of the Old Testament as literature. Now, you guys saw that on 2:4, such were the origins of heaven and earth when they were created. We moved into another area. That was the end of the first material that we saw. And then we moved into this second, more personal, up close. You can think it's the same writer if you choose, but it looks like a fairly different textual tradition. And that's what we're talking about, textual traditions. So this second account of so-called creation, even though you can say, well, we already created everything. Well, if we've already created everything, why is there no wild plants, bushes, or anything else on the earth? And so on. So, you know, there is a problem here right off. It's not necessarily a contradiction. That's again, the problem with people who take the Old Testament too seriously. The ones who lay on the Old Testament more than it can bear. These are not contradictions. These are just different writers whose work has been put together in a final whole. It's like what we call, you know, spliced together like that. Again, as I told you, it's like taking the four Gospels and putting them together, even though certainly John and the other three contradict each other or don't agree on many points. Some points they do, but very little that they really agree on. Most believers don't see the differences and just put them together anyway in a kind of spinach and assume it's all true, when in fact probably very little bit has anything to do with truth, but once again aesthetics, beauty or something like that, or art, but very little to do with history. And you know, people don't realize that ancient writers wrote. People think that the ancients were, you know, idiots. They were not idiots. They were extremely sophisticated people, and they wrote. And a lot of them wrote very creatively. And then the other people who saw their writing collected it at some point and were impressed by it. And then they didn't want to lose any. So they spliced it all together in a narrative whole. The people who spliced it together weren't as creative as the people who wrote these things. They were more like an editorial board in a newspaper or in a publishing company, Slate magazine or something like that. And I don't think that they always made the best choices. But one thing with the Old Testament, I don't think they threw anything away. So they just kept everything, even if it contradicted something. So this was another account, very good account, totally different, very personal, up close, sort of like a close-up shot, a zooming in shot. And this, even the word for created, God created, is different. Here, God doesn't create in the Hebrew, like the God created the heavens and the earth and so on and so forth. Here, God molds man, as I told you, like a bit of clay. And he doesn't create men and women in multitudes. He creates one man, and then we have this wonderful story about how the woman appeared. The story of, the reason I mentioned the Old Testament parallels is that the story of Gilgamesh in here has a similar situation to the Garden of Eden here. And that's an earlier book than when this was finally collected. So people think that the Bible writers were influenced and did borrow materials from other cultures around them. but they fashion them in their own way. I think in the Gilgamesh, the main thing is that he's seeking eternity, which most people are. And he's, therefore, the tree of life is the main thing. Eternal life, if you want to call it that, is the main thing. So, in that story, Gilgamesh is seeking eternal life. And, pardon me, he's looking for a garden wherein this exists. And the other tree, the second tree, is more Old Testament Hebraic. Or, if you like the first story, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That isn't in the ancient text, it's only in the Old Testament text. And that plays a more important point than the others. Because why, if he eats of the knowledge of good and evil, is he going to die? You know, I mean, obviously if he eats of the tree of life, he's going to keep on living forever. That's the implication. So there's some really underneath themes here that are interesting. Okay, so a river flowed, he breathed nostrils into this being, and the man became a living being, and there was no one else there at all. It wasn't a multiple creation, it was a single creation. There wasn't even a woman around. God was like a sculptor, sort of like Pinocchio. The craftsman making a Pinocchio. And here's this picture of the world. A river flowed from Eden and divided into 4 great streams. One was called Pishon, and it flowed into the land of Havilah, where there's a lot of gold. And some more minerals and stones are mentioned. I don't know if the translation is the same in all Bibles, so I won't mention them. The second was Gihon, and this circles the land of Cush. Well, Cush we know is Ethiopia. So that has to be the Blue Nile. That has to be the Blue Nile, you see. And the third is the Tigris, and the fourth is the Euphrates. So I assume the other one, Havilah, is another African area, probably the White Nile. So what, oh, there's a Blue Nile and a White Nile? Yeah, there is. They come together down in Upper Egypt someplace, Sudan, somewhere like that. You can look at a map. I don't know if that's exactly right, but the Tigris and the Euphrates, east of Ashur, where the Assyrians were, and the Euphrates we know all about because American guys are getting killed around there these days. That goes all the way up into Syria, in that border area where the soldiers just went into recently to try to clear it out is near where the Euphrates comes down from Turkey or Asia Minor into northern Syria and then Iraq. Okay. Now, is this the Word of God? No, I don't really think it's the Word of God as such. It's not the word of the Tahitian God. It certainly has nothing to do with the Bushmen. Where's the Amazon? Where's the Mississippi? Where's the Yangtze? I can name you 20 big rivers, the Danube, that are not in this, the Rhine, that are not in this story. So it's the knowledge those people have. That's what these people who go keep on saying the Bible is totally true in every respect are putting more on the text than the text can bear. It's not that you're not a decent person and that your belief is an incredible. That's an admirable feeling that this is the Word of God, because you aesthetically it pleases you. Follow me? But to think that this is any accuracy here as far as world geography goes is just wrong. And yet on the other hand, it is accurate, isn't it? To some extent. It's accurate from a Middle Eastern perspective. It's what someone in the Middle East knew at that time. That's accurate to some degree. In other words, they're telling you the knowledge. They don't know about the Niger or the Congo River. You follow me? They don't know those things. They don't know any rivers in Australia. I'm sure they've never heard of the place. And they surely don't know Fiji and Tahiti and that. We only discovered them ourselves a couple hundred years ago. You know, they don't know anything. You know, in this country they only discovered about 500 years ago. So yeah, they were painting the world as they knew it, and 2 big rivers that they knew were the Tigris and the Euphrates. I assume that the other 2 have to do with the Nile. but I can't prove that. Except that I know that the gold that they mentioned, the Egyptians were always looking for gold up in the Sudan. That's why they were really interested in this area called Nubia. They got gold from up there. So I would think that points to that direction, that there was gold in them Gar Hills. And then we've already talked about the use of the word Lord God here, or Yahweh God, or Jehovah God, or Yahweh. I don't know how you pronounce it. I see a religious Jewish person would not pronounce it. I think that's right. I'm doing it because the scholars do it now, and so we do it. But I think, if that was their scruple, we should observe it. We should say Lord the way they do. We shouldn't say Yahweh God or Jehovah God or something like that. They said Lord. And when they didn't have God there, they just had the name YHWH, they said Lord. And I think that's really good. But this is a class, and it's not full of awe. If I were out in the real world, I wouldn't say Yahweh to anybody. I would say the Lord. If I was speaking to people to show respect, I wouldn't say Jehovah or anything like that, because I know that was for them forbidden, and only the high priest said it once a year in the inner sanctum of the temple to ask atonement on behalf of the whole people. It was a holy, holy, holy name, awesome name, and they didn't want to pronounce it. Why should we? Why should we take liberties with their text? They gave it to us. Why should we feel we're free to do whatever we want with it? I don't think that's fair. So out of respect, I would just say the Lord if I were talking to others. In a class like this, to illustrate it, text lines and stuff, okay, Yahweh. Fair enough? Anyway, you don't have to do what I do. But I think what I'm telling you is the result of some experience, so it probably isn't such a bad thing to pay attention. So, the Lord God, or Yahweh God, took the man he had created and settled him in the Garden of Eden to take care of it, like a garden. Eve is his private garden. This is not a scientific creation story, is it? This is an artful story. And it's going to have a moral. This is impressive artistically speaking. I'm taking my time in the Old Testament because these are the stories everyone knows, right? Suppose I just covered the Garden of Eden story in like 5 minutes, when there's so much more to do. You see, that wouldn't be proper either. But to go slow means we're not going to do a lot of work in the first half of the course. But that's fair enough. I would like you to know well what everyone wants you to know, then badly a lot of stuff. Once we go through this stuff, you can easily read a description of the Old Testament and go at your leisure and get all the other stuff easily. Fair enough? Okay. So, there's another thing I was trying to show you last time. I didn't go very deep into it. But God, in this story, not the other one. The other story is sophisticated, abstract, ceremonial, distant. This one is up close, personal. God treats man in this story like a jerk. He talks down to him. He even seems to treats him like a child. He treats him like, you would talk to a little kid. Listen how he talks to him here. And I'm making fun of it a little bit. Okay, here's the admonition, 16. You may eat of all the trees in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you are not to eat, for on the day you eat it you will surely die. Now that doesn't sound too much like he's talking down to him, but as he goes along it gets a little worse when God speaks to him, like here in line 13 of chapter 3. When Adam is trying to avoid responsibility, God says to him, "What is this you have done?" Like a stern father talking to a child. Naughty, naughty, shame on you, and so on and so forth. So he sort of talks to man like a stern parent would. Anyway, he thinks to himself, and he's very personalized here, it's not good that man should be alone, I'll help make him a companion. So he fashioned all the birds of the air and the wild beasts. So you see, it's at this point he fashions the other creatures. You see that here? Line 19. So you see there, those of you who think you can put these together in a single, you can't. And that's the weird thing. 1900, 2,500 years. I don't know when people never said boo about this. Never looked at this and said, what's going on here? Why? Because they were afraid to. Because authority would not allow them. And so they never thought out of the box. I mean, if you were Joan of Arc, you didn't read this and say to yourself, hey, there's a contradiction there? Oh, no, you daren't do it. She got burned anyway, but she didn't want to get burned for this. You follow me? We weren't free to do it. We only started, and in a large parts of the world, I don't want to hurt Muslims' feelings, but you see what's happening in the Muslim Middle East. They're really in the Middle Ages, which is dangerous for us, because they have all the modern accoutrements, but they're living with a medieval mentality. And terrible things can happen in a situation like that, not to them, but to us, because they don't have a lot to lose. But we have an awful lot to lose by this sort of total irresponsible mindset that we're encountering here. Or a mindset that's convinced of its own righteousness to the point that your life is meaningless to them. So they have no pity for you whatsoever. You don't matter. You're just something that should be blown away anyway. Well, you see, that's because they haven't gone through an enlightenment period yet, and they haven't separated church and state. I see the Bush administration is trying to unseparate church and state now. And that we have, I'm listening to those testimonies in Congress of the new Chief Justice that they want to put in there. Has anyone listened to those? It's quite frightening to listen to, because the people for him are all just sort of patting him on the back, praising, but you know that they know something that they're not telling the rest of us. And the people against him, of course, are pulling him apart. But he is totally evasive on everything, totally evasive, never tells them anything of what he really thinks. Because, you know, he's been put in there to do certain things, and he knows that's the case. And it's kind of frightening to see that this is what America is at the present time, you know, being ripped apart by people who want to control others' minds, and maybe both sides want to control. I'm not saying one side is better than the other, because I'm not totally against the present administration, but it is frightening to see that this division of church and state is being eroded. When they asked him about it, he said, oh, well, there is no division of church and state. It's a different thing. I forget what he said, but he was extremely evasive and, you know, playing with words. And he's going to be Chief Justice for the next 30 years. You know, maybe 40. He may hang around until he's 80 years old or something in that particular job, just like the last one did. And that's kind of frightening. You're going to be seeing that person for the next, well, the rest of your mature life. And he's going to be controlling all the decisions that the court is making. It's really kind of frightening to see that situation. But anyway, we already lived through 30 years because the other Chief Justice was just as bad. I mean, in the sense that he didn't want to observe the elemental divisions of church and state. And see, it's the division of church and state that allows us to be free in terms of thinking. Doesn't mean you have to observe a given, not be a religious person. I feel that one is. But just one doesn't want to be told what to believe. That's it. So anyway, that's just a diversion there. But the reason people didn't see these things, like that particular God fashioned the wild beast and the birds after he fashioned man, and that's just totally at odds with the first account. Plus it's nonsense. But it's not bad, artistically speaking. It's a good story artistically speaking. It works artistically speaking, aesthetically speaking. So anyway, he brought these creatures. One of the reasons the writer here wants to wants to wait for that, because he wants to bring these creatures to the man. Why? Because the man is going to do what? Name them, as if he's got some supernatural intuition that these names have a more than ordinary significance. And in the classical period they always did. You see sentences like, for instance, in the Quran, Muhammad, and God taught Adam all the names. And God taught Adam, like the first man, like the names of the animal had some significance intrinsically in themselves. To be master of the name. I think sometimes Jesus is portrayed as having some mastery over the name of God, or in the name of God. And in Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, there was a teacher recently in the 1700s in Eastern Europe who is the person that a lot of these enthusiastic this one group was called Chabad, what we call Hasidim, follow, and that teacher was called the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name. What did it mean to be that he could do miracles by naming the name of God, the way Jesus can do in the New Testament? Not that I believe anyone does miracles by naming anything, but that's how we always saw magicians and teachers and so on. So the naming, God taught Adam all the names, Muhammad says, and this is it. He brought man to name the animals and the other creatures. So he named all the cattle, the birds, the wild beasts. So this is not as good a history as the first account, right? But it's more attractive. It's more artistically pleasing. It's artistically probably superior. Scientifically, it's inferior. Artistically, it's superior. So you have to look at it like that. So then we're in the story. We like the story. We want to know what happens. Whereas the first account is not a story you want to know what happens. It just is an event. So God made man fall asleep, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs. And he fixed flesh about it. And the man woke up, and probably this was a very old saying that the story is built around. This is bone from my bones, flesh from my flesh. This is called woman, for this was taken from man. That was probably a very old, I have it set aside in my text, which I like this text because it sets old passages aside. What it thinks are old, like poetic phrases. And so it could be that was the original thing that the writer picked to tell a story on, and some other sayings that we're getting. Anyway, we're hurrying to the end here of this story. So, this rib problem, I'm not a nurse or someone who knows someone who knows the physiological structure of mankind. What are they called? Someone who knows physiology. Anyway, physiologist is good enough. Anyway, I'm not someone who knows those things very, very well. But someone said to me once in one of the classes, and I'm not sure if it's true, that men and women do have different rib structure. Is that true? I don't know. Huh? It isn't true. Well, these people obviously thought that they did. They thought that man had less ribs than women. I'm sure that's what they thought. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But you guys can look into it and tell me. I'm not, as I said, I'm not spent a lot of time in the hospital. Are you a nursing student?
No, I've heard that before, though.
Yeah.
People have told me that before.
Yeah, so I've heard that too.
Somebody told me it's not true.
Yeah. I'm just throwing it out as a possibility. But it isn't probably, well, I don't know if it's true. I'm not Leonardo da Vinci. I don't cut people up and, look at all their, or Michelangelo or these people. You know, I'm not into looking at corpses and things like that. But I think the writers thought there was something different about men and women rib-wise. Because if Adam was going to lose a rib, it must be that other beings must have had this rib or something. I'm not sure. In any event, probably not, but possibly yes. Put it that way. What else? Why would he? What would be the point of the story otherwise? I'm not sure why he would choose to frame it like that. But anyway. And this next conclusion at the end of chapter 2, that's why a man leaves his father and joins himself to his mother, and to his wife. Leaves his father and mother and joins himself to his wife, and they become one body. Well, because I suppose it's saying that the piece of the body was taken from the man, so they return to their... this is very artistic, you see. There's no science behind that. That's just the writer is... Yeah, that's right, okay? That's how I see it. Yeah, take it or leave it. Just making these, you know, pulling these things out of thin air, but they are pleasing to us. And when people in the frontier or in the villages in the Middle Ages or something would talk to their children, I'm saying, look, it's because Adam took his rib and and that's why you marry a woman, and that's why you become one flesh, and that's why you're closer to your wife than you are to your parents. You know, it's satisfying to people to see it like this. That's a great writer who can encapsulate those things. And I think we're going to see that the Yahwist, we call him the Yahwist, because of his use of the name Yahweh for God, is a great writer. Now another thing, look, both of them were naked, but they didn't feel any shame. That's incredible, because you know how the Middle East is even today. They wrap themselves in so many clothes. I mean, you can't even get through half of the blankets on a Bedouin. And, you know, they never go in bathing suits or anything like that. And the women are just like, don't go near them or you get your head chopped off or something like that. Yet look at how sophisticated this writer is. He's basically got a nudist colony going here. And he knows that originally, you know, he knows like animals, for instance, don't feel shame. They're not clothed. They're basically naked, though most of them have a protective coating of some to give them warmth. But even the creatures that are just skin, I don't know, there's a few creatures like that. They don't worry how they look to anybody. They're not bothered. He knows that man's shame is unique to man. Shame of and it's cultural. He understands that. That's very sophisticated. Okay. Chapter 3. The snake or the serpent. In chapter 3, to some extent, I think that the trees have more or less gone down to the one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the other tree is not spoken of to any extent anymore, the tree of life. Except maybe in the moral at the end of the story. Another thing, the snake. First of all, the writer knows that people have a natural fear of certain things. One thing they have a fear of is certainly snakes. Probably people fear snakes more than even spiders. I know women don't like spiders from what I'm told, but I don't think men really are afraid of spiders. Just about everybody who's got, you know, unless they're trained not to be, are afraid of things like snakes. It's just a frightening creature for some reason, even though it's quite a beautiful creature when you get to know them. My kids were very into snakes. I never would take them in my hands and sort of crawl around my neck and do all the stuff that they would do. But it's just a matter of how comfortable you feel. But most people have a natural sort of, and the writer knows that. But even more than that, you know, I think this writer knows that a lot of the things he's speaking about here, that's why he's a great artist, are like ancient civilization of maybe apes, monkeys, chimps, and others. You know, I don't know if you have seen pictures, but when a snake comes into the area that chimps and others are inhabiting, they really go mad. They start squawking, running up the trees, and they get very upset. First of all, in Africa and places, snakes can go up in the trees and catch them. And, you know, pythons and different creatures like that, and can, not poisonous so much, although there are mambas and stuff up in the trees too. So, I mean, the snake is a very worrisome creature to our ancestral forebears like monkey kind and so on and so forth. And I think that's something way deep in the understanding of this gardening situation, where the writer shows that to some extent he knows that we came out of environments of that kind. This fear of snakes. Okay, the serpent is a kind of embodiment of evil, if you like. He turns into a kind of Satan at some point. I don't know, is he ever called Satan here? I don't know if the word is, I can't remember if the word is actually used here. But we now think of him as Satan. But here he's just a serpent. I don't know if there's anything about Satan yet. We'll see if there is. So, he's a talking snake. This is a talking snake. Again, this is not real. This is literature. You know, the ancient man loved animal stories because they often could say things about animals. Aesop's fables and different stories like that. In India, there's called the fables of Vidpai. They make animals talk and do all kinds of things because they can say things about animals that they can't say about men and women because they might get into trouble with the local authorities or some clan or the police or the ruling elite. But they can do say anything they want about animals and put all their interesting stories in animal form. And of course, you know, we have Walt Disney, who has done that for our modern time. And you know, Roger the Rabbit, most Walt Disney things don't usually mix animals and people that much. Some, not that much. I can't think of any Walt Disney that mixes animals and people, but there are other stories that have animals mixed with people. Other spin-offs of Walt Disney, and this is one of those, animals mixed with people, talking animals mixed with talking people. And a lot of the ancient stories were like that too. So this is not a new thing. This is kind of very old, but it's a literary device again. Most people take it like that because they say, oh, that's Satan in the Garden of Eden. Muslims in the Quran have Satan. And yeah, people know what the symbol means. Anyway, he's very crafty, like Pinocchio's seducer. Did God really say you are not to eat of all the trees in the garden? The woman answered the serpent like a little child. We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, like little children at school. It's very effective. God said, you must not eat nor touch it under pain of death. See, the person is like a kid, doesn't realize the effect of what they're saying, they just recite it. And that's also very good, artistically speaking. The serpent then said, look, like someone at school, you will not die. God knows, in fact, that on the day you eat it, your eyes will be open, you will be like gods, knowing good and evil. But the odd thing is that the tree of good and evil has been substituted for the tree of life, because the main thing ancients really said about their gods is that they were immortal, that they lived forever, that they ate the tree of life, ambrosia and stuff like that. So this is already getting a very subtle difference. I'm not sure gods are the only ones who know the difference between good and evil. Certainly not the Greek gods, maybe the Hebrew god, that may be true. Anyway, the woman saw the tree was good to eat, just like the first story, and pleasing, and saw the knowledge it could give was desirable, so she took some fruit, and she gave her husband some. That's why women get a bad rap in this, but I don't think there's anything terribly wrong here so far in things, just being innocent, childlike. And then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew they were naked again. We never forget that. That's a great, if you like, effect of the story. That now the nakedness does mean it. So the story then has a moral. They sew fig leaves on themselves. Then the man and his wife. And why do they say Adam and his wife, the man and his wife? Because Adam and man are the same word in Hebrew. Adam, first man, is also the name for mankind. Adam. And mankind in Hebrew is Ben Adam, son of Adam. So Adam and man are the same word. So some translations will have Adam here, others will have the man. Mine has the man, yours may have Adam. I have to look at the Hebrew to see if it has the article or not. Whether it says Ha Adam, the man, Ha Adam, or just Adam. I don't have the Hebrew next to me, so I can't do that at the moment. So, this is another great line. They heard the sound of the Lord God, or Yahweh God, walking in the garden in the cool of the day. All these are great artistic lines, famous in literature forever after. What's God doing walking around in the cool of the day? I mean, this is totally anthropomorphic, not abstract. Literary. God called to, do you have the man or to Adam? Probably you have to Adam. Mine, I think, is the man. Mine 9. But the Lord God called out to, what do you have, Adam or the man? The man? Anyone have Adam? No? Okay, the man. Where are you? Listen to that voice here, because we're going to hear it again in other stories, and we're going to be able to show it's the same writer. Where are you? I heard the sound of you in the garden. You replied, I was afraid because I was so naked, so I hid. Who told you you were naked? Have you been eating of the tree I forbade you to eat? Stern father, very aggressive. It was the woman, like a kid in a school ground. It wasn't me, teacher. He gave it to me. And it's really very human, but also very childish, isn't it? Blaming someone else. He blamed someone else. Yeah, it was she. She did it. She gave me the fruit and I ate it. Then the Lord God asked the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman then does the same thing. It wasn't me, it wasn't me. The serpent tempted. You know, always tossing it off on someone else. That's what kids do in the playground. The serpent tempted me and I ate. Then the Lord Yahweh, okay, so the story's over, right? That's it. That's the end of the story. That's it. Now we're going to have morals from here on in. We're going to have a conclusion. So this guy, he just sketches as much as he needs, no more. Doesn't repeat himself or herself. And then he draws his conclusion. But he's done this in a very few lines. And yet some of those lines, I don't know if you were familiar with them, are some of those famous lines in the literature of mankind. How many have heard or remember those lines, even though you maybe not have read the story? These are famous lines. And it's all packed into like a couple of paragraphs. This guy goes, gets the minimum he needs, and then hits you with the moral, which is usually maybe some ditty or poem that was floating around. First, Yahweh God said to the serpent, because you have done this, be accursed beyond all cattle, wild beasts. Crawl on your belly and eat dust every day of your life. Well, that's from a human point of view. I mean, the serpent doesn't know he's crawling in the dirt. He doesn't mind the dirt. He's got a skin that's really good. And in fact, the dirt doesn't even cling to his skin. He can slither through the dirt, hide in the dirt, he's fine. It's only human beings who don't like lying around in the dirt. Plus half the serpents I know from this area are up in the trees. So again, this is an artistic human thing, but it has no reality in terms of the creature we're talking about. It's always subjective from a human point of view. But it's observant. Okay, you crawl in the dirt. That's why you crawl in the dirt, because you tempted Eve. Second, I will make you enemies of each other, you and the woman, your offspring and her offspring. She or it will crush your head, or he, that is, because when he sees you, he's going to snap on you, he's afraid of you, and you will strike its heel out in the fields. This is the thing, a rattlesnake or something like that, and when you're out in the cobra or whatever, when you're out there, he's going to kill you, and you're going to, the minute he sees you, he's going to kill you, and you're going to bite him on the heel, because that's where he's exposed. Okay, that's the snake's got his curse. The woman, okay, woman, now you're going to get it. I will multiply your pains in childbearing. You will give birth to your children in pain. Your yearning shall be for your husband, and he shall be Lord over you. Well, that doesn't really float very well in the present period. It was probably pretty effective up till about 1950. But things have gotten either out of hand or changed a lot since then. And I'm not sure who's Lord over anyone at the moment. It might even be vice versa. But classically, that's the way people saw things. And in the Middle East, it's pretty much still like that. The woman steps out of line, you know what happens to her. She really is in deep trouble situation. And it's not our world out here in California or in the States or in Europe or whatever. And that's the problem with the West versus these other cultural areas. Your yearning shall be for your husband, and he will be Lord over you. And the writers notice that women have child in pain. Animals don't, to that extent, somewhat, but mankind does, because of the way mankind is constructed. I think it has to do with the aperture and the hip situation. Not a great physiologist, as you know. Okay, now, man, your turn. Because you listened to your wife, and you ate the tree which was forbidden you to eat. Okay, you can say you didn't know it, but the story looks like he did know that it was from that tree. You're going to have to work for a living. And he knows that, in fact, people don't like working for a living, and it's tough, and mankind does work for a living. Accursed be the soil before you. With suffering, you'll get your food out of it. This is a farmer world. This is not hunter-gatherer anymore. This is a farming society writing this, cultivating society. It will yield, see, this is not the flock person writing this. This is a settled person, isn't it? Because a hunter-gatherer, he's not so worried about the soil. An Eskimo, for instance, he's out there hunting walrus and stuff. And other people, cavemen who hunted the big herds of mammoths and other creatures that were roaming around Europe and America. And it will yield, because the Middle East was settled very early and became acidified very early. And it will yield brambles and thistles, and you shall eat wild plants. With sweat on your brow, you shall eat your bread until you return to the soil, because you were taken from it. For dust you are, and dust you will return. And of course, this is one of the most famous lines people pronounce at funerals all the time. And look right out of the Yaws. That's how the man continues his naming activities. He named his wife Eve. What does Eve mean in Hebrew? In Hebrew, the word is Hava. Hava. Hava, which is life. Life. She is the source of life. She's not only the source of life, she's named life in Hebrew in this name. Because she was the mother of all those who lived. See, all these names are based on some saying that relates to that individual. We'll see that always is the case. So these guys, they're always doing everything. He's a clothes maker, he's a sculptor, he's running around getting clothes from them, from skins. Well, I don't understand this, because suddenly the tree of life comes back into the picture, and God is upset about the situation because he's worried that the man is going to become like us, I guess because he has the knowledge of good and evil that we're supposed to have, meaning we the gods. So the gods are plural here, and of course Elohim, the name, the second part is a plural in Hebrew anyway. Yahweh is a singular. Anyway, it probably means the royal we, or the whole host of heaven, or the other gods, or the angels, or whatever you want to think it means. It's not clear. You see, next he's going to eat from the tree of life. But I thought he was always eating from the tree of life. So this thing is really not very consistent. But no, who cares? Nobody cares. The story is gripping, so that's all that matters. He'll pick from the tree of life, and now we do get the classical meaning of the tree of life. He'll live forever when he eats from the tree of life. So I didn't know he was forbidden not to eat from the tree of life. Maybe I missed something. So he got him expelled from the Garden of Eden, and he banished the man, and he put a cherub with a flame of flashing sword to guard the way to the tree of life. And that's basically from the Gilgamesh story, that Gilgamesh has to get past things to get to eat the fruit of eternal life. And what's a cherub? These cherubs were not like little roly-poly things, love creatures like the Middle Ages. Cherubim were fierce lion men sort of creatures that they had outside of tombs and palaces in Assyria. You've seen these male, half, like the Sphinx to some extent, half man, half lion sort of creature. Fearsome creatures, not something pleasant. And in the temple in Jerusalem there were cherubim, if you want to call them plural, that were protecting the Holy of Holies. So let's hurry up. Since we got a bit more time, I started late here, and I'll go to about 8:25, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. I'll keep you a bit longer because I wasted some time talking about organizational things. We didn't make up for lost time anyway. So the man had intercourse with his wife Eve. She conceived, and naming is always important. And she names him, he doesn't seem to name him here, Cain, because I have acquired a man with the help of Yahweh or the Lord or whatever you want to call it. What does acquiring a man with the help of the Lord have to do with Cain? Well, if you know Hebrew, you know it does, because this is like buying something. Kana in Hebrew is buying. And so it's playing around with the name Cain as if it's Kana, as if it's bought or acquired. I bought or acquired. And the Hebrew person will know that that's playing off the name, the same as Hava, Eve does. And quick, she had another child, and his name was Abel, the brother of Cain. It doesn't explain why he's called Abel, because Abel actually, to some extent, means evil. And he's not evil. So they skipped that. Now Abel became a shepherd and kept flocks, while Cain tilled the soil. Now there's another point that's going to come through in the Yahweh particularly, but maybe in generally speaking in the Old Testament and these early chapters. God, and that's strange because we just had a cultivating person reflected in the condemnations of the story of Adam and Eve. God likes hunter-gatherer, shepherd people. He likes their offerings better. He doesn't like gruel, grain, cereal, stuff like that. For him, that's more cheesy. He likes, as you'll find, as I think Adam is shown to want here, you see. Cain is the tiller of the soil, but Adam prefers Abel, so does God later on, as we'll see in lots of instances. And if you'll remember, Isaac likes Esau, or Jacob, I forget the flocks. We'll get into that. But in this instance, once again, well, it's first instance, but we'll see other instances of it. The hero here, it's Adam, but later it'll be God himself, prefers an animal offering. And one of the things he likes, particularly, is the fat. It's just like we go to a barbecue and we smell these days, of course, a lot of people are vegetarians, so they don't like this, but classically, even in this country, people love beach barbecues and backyard barbecues. The thing they like is to smell the creature burning on the fire, this fat and so on. God and these other people are like us in that regard. They prefer that. They don't want someone to give them a bowl of Rice Krispies. They want something substantial. They want to smell that meat burning with the fat. So, you see, Yahweh looked with favor on Abel. By the way, look what's happening. God is disappearing from this storyline. It's just plain Yahweh now. Yet it's clearly the same writer. Nothing has changed. One thing has moved right into the other. But for some reason, the writer got tired of adding God to this type of narrative, and he doesn't really do it much anymore. He only does it in the Adam and Eve story. From here on in, he just sticks to one type of story is God, the other type of story is Yahweh. You see that? So there, God has dropped out. How do I account for that? Well, I'm not a genius, but I would assume that the editors tried to harmonize the text and gave up. It's not a very satisfying explanation, but it's the best I can do for you guys. Okay, so the Lord, and it is God here, prefers Abel's offering. Why? Just because he likes the smell of the fat and he prefers shepherd, hunter, gatherer offerings. Not gatherer, hunter. He likes beasts. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you so upset? And Cain said, I don't know what he says. Anyway, he's not happy about things. But so Cain plots. And you know, I'll get you in a minute. Let me finish one I did. Even in the open range movies and things like that you got on TV these days and stuff like that, and classical westerns, you always had the homesteaders fighting the herders, the cattlemen. They're two different kinds of species of beings and they didn't like each other. Usually it's the cattlemen killing the homesteaders. But in the Middle East, it was always the homesteaders really killing the Bedouin sort of people, the nomadic people. Because they're they don't want these people incurring in their settled areas. And that's what happens here. You see Cain slays Abel. It's almost symbolic of the homestead sort of people, the farming sort of settled people, killing the more wandering herder sort of people. You say, well, I thought it was the other way around. Well, in America it was for a while, but in fact, it's even today. Most homesteaders have guns in their houses, and if there's someone who's an interloper who is, wandering across their area, they're liable to shoot at them, not vice versa. Yeah, what's your question?
I've heard it said that the blood might be the difference, like maybe because it's a life being taken, maybe that's why the sacrifice is better?
We'll get to that. I don't see that at this point here, but the only thing I see here that showed anything, it's not better, it's just the way the writer, it's like us, if a guy goes to invite you to his house and we're having an outdoor barbecue and he just gives you oatmeal, you're not going to be too happy about the party. I think it's basically that.
No significant. Okay.
I don't think so at the moment. And certainly the fat is very important for the smell of the pleasing aroma. And the temple later is going to be one huge barbecue pit, frankly. But not such a bad idea in the sense that if you've seen slaughterhouses anywhere, you'll see the temple actually is a superior institution because it raised the taking of life to a holy activity. It isn't just sort of something done in a back alley where an animal just, you know, hung up with a hook and throats cut. I mean, I've been to a slaughterhouse. Ever been to a slaughterhouse? It's pretty gruesome. It's terribly gruesome. So, anyway, I don't see the blood thing yet. But if you see it, you're equal to me. Maybe you will. Maybe you do. Now, I'm hurrying here. So, of course, Cain tricks Abel, or, you know, takes him out there and in the open country kills him. Open country because it's better to kill people out there. No one sees you particularly. And also, you know, you can get away with it easier out there. The implication is there's people around you. And then Yahweh is treating Cain the same way he treated Adam and Eve, isn't he? Where is your brother Abel? You know, he starts the thing again that he did with Eve and with Adam. The same, you can see it's the same writer. And Cain plays the same way that you can see it's a consistent pattern of this writer. Cain is the same as a child in the playground. I don't know. But he's more of a wise guy. He's like a tough kid in the playground. You know, telling the teacher, am I my brother's keeper? And look, that, and God doesn't say, what have you done? I'm not a good actor. I'm just trying to dramatize it so you get the sound of this, y'all. Listen, now here it is. Listen to the sound of your brother's blood crying out from the ground. That's the blood you're talking. To some extent, this is the murder blood. Of course, that is the vengeance problem. When the blood in the Middle East is very important, so that the spilling of blood relationships are very important. The spilling of blood has to be avenged in the Middle East because that's the building block of the relationships that exist. Now be accursed and driven from the ground. That is open to you to receive your brother's blood at your hands. So again, the same kind of curse. When you till the ground, it won't yield up its product. So there we go again. Like Adam. But this is for murder. Worse than that, you'll be a fugitive and wander over the whole earth. You see, the worst punishment in the Bedouin tribal society, even today in that world, is to be an outcast. To be thrown out from the tribe. Look at the inner cities of our world. I mean, where there are gangs. If you're an outcast from the gang, you have no one to protect you. That's the point. See, Cain says to God, my punishment is worse than I can bear. You drive me from the ground, and I must hide and be a fugitive and a wanderer. And whoever comes across me can kill me. Well, there's nobody around, but obviously there are people around. And that's the thing that the tribe, the clan, in the nomadic world protected you from. That's what the gang does in the inner cities. Anyone come across you, so you know, if you're a member of a gang in prison or city, no one's going to mess with you if you don't want to deal with your gang. In the Bedouin world, it was based on blood. That's why blood vengeance was a very important aspect of their behavior. And here it's still more or less intact here. But his problem is the typical nomad outcast, whoever comes across me then can kill me. Okay, God, Yahweh, we don't have God anymore. Yahweh says, in the end of this story, he said, this is a quick one too. Bam, 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 it's done. Again, if anyone kills Cain, sevenfold vengeance will be taken from him. He shows you that vengeance is the thing. And he put in a mark on Cain, his forehead or wherever, to prevent whoever might come across him from striking him down. Well, you know, there's nobody supposed to be out there, but there obviously are. And Cain left the presence of Yahweh and settled in the land of Nod. And look at this. Cain had intercourse with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. What do you mean he had intercourse with his wife? Where is his wife from? When did she get into the picture? I thought these were the only people on the earth. You see, he always isn't concerned with such unimportant facts. He always is a storyteller. First and foremost, a great storyteller. And these are incidentals. Whatever will, it's like Hollywood script. Whatever helps the story, that's it. And this is, okay, yeah, he got married and other people are around and stuff like that, but he doesn't bother telling you how all this happened. Take a 10-minute break, we'll come back, okay?